So this is going to be a fun one. Yesterday I was at the TechCrunch 50 conference on stage and talking about different companies and seeing all these new startups coming out. So I wanted to come and get the VC's outlook on that world right afterwards, and that's why we're here. So who are you?
So my name's Bob Ackerman. I'm the managing director and co-founder of Allegis Capital. We're a seed and early stage venture capital firm. But I'm also a recovering entrepreneur myself, having built a couple of companies in the past and really looking at Allegis Capital, a venture firm, as my latest startup.
And that separates you from a lot of VCs lately, because a lot of them seem like investment bankers or people who came out of MBA programs or something like that. Or I'm not sure that a lot of them have built successful companies.
Well, I think if you go back and you look at the origins of the business, historically, venture capital was the domain of ex-operating guys who would bring their experience and work with the next generation of entrepreneurs. And capital would be part of the process, but it was as much about what expertise could you bring in terms of helping entrepreneurs, kind of transition an idea into a successful business. But as venture capital became more and more successful, and as more and more capital, flooded into venture capital, frankly, there weren't enough of those ex-operating guys around, and so the model morphed, and you began to have very bright people, but coming with backgrounds that had less operating expertise, and got to a point in time where if you had an engineering background and you had worked as a product manager for a few years in a major tech company and then had an MBA, that was the new entry point into venture. And I think for areas of venture capital, that probably works real well. But for where we operate at Allegis Capital, we're in the business of ideas and creating value from ideas. And there really is no substitute, in my opinion, for the experience of having done it yourself, being able to anticipate all of the challenges, the things that might go wrong, and to be able to anticipate those in advance and devise strategies to get around the potholes in the road.
It seems like it's a tough time to be a venture capitalist right now. Certainly we haven't had a really good set of IPOs lately. And it seems like the exits are slowing down. At least that's what I hear every time I listen to VC firms on stage.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
It's almost like
that.
Dyer. It's got.
I don't know about that. Number one, it's never been easy to start a successful company. Sometimes capital is flowing more freely than others. But if the measure is what does it take to take an idea and build a big successful company, that's never been easy. And I think today is a great time to build companies. I look at our own portfolio experience. We have a company in our portfolio called Ironport Systems. Ironport Systems was funded by us and another venture firm back in January of 2002. And if you remember what's going on at that point in time, we're 4 months after 9/11. The economy is in total chaos. The tech market has crashed and burned. And it
was continuing to burn.
And it was still smoldering.
I laid myself off of from a company in March. So.
So the conventional wisdom, if you just talked to venture capitalists, was it's all over, it's done, we've had our run. Nobody, a rational man wouldn't try and start a company in this environment. Well, you have to remember that entrepreneurs are not rational men to start with. You get up in the morning and you believe you're going to change the world and the laws of physics don't apply to you. But in that environment, what it meant is that the bar was a lot higher to be able to get capitalized. And Ironport came in to us. It was one of the founders is a guy that we had backed previously, Tom Gillis, in a company called I-Beam Networks. We had been successful together. And they came in with an idea of, email is broken. It's the new fabric of communication in the global enterprise, and it can't be controlled. And we happen to know conversations with some of the CIOs that we work closely with that in fact was an accurate statement. So what we had in Ironport was a guy that we knew we had worked with, but also a very compelling vision, clear articulation of a major problem, an idea of how to solve that problem. Well, that company, in 2002, it had 8 venture groups chasing it. So on the other side of the table, nothing was getting funded. And here comes Ironport with a really great idea and a phenomenal team. And they were picking amongst their investors. And based on experience that we had in the past and track record of being able to bring value to our portfolio companies, we were chosen as one of the two investors to build that company. So that's January, February 2002. 5.5 years later, after a lot of work together, and it was hard work. A lot of leveraging of our corporate relationships, a lot of navigating. Do we go international? Do we go domestic? But 5.5 years later, the company is purchased by Cisco for $830 million and is now the core of Cisco's security product strategy.
Yeah.
So, good example of a phenomenal company, a great outcome, started in a very, very difficult market. But I think they were successful, number one, because, they had total conviction. They had identified a real problem requiring what I call a high-value solution. They picked investors that they felt would mitigate their risk, help them be more successful, and sort of de-risk the overall strategy, and then just executed.
Yeah.
It's a simple matter of execution, but that's where it usually goes wrong.
Give me a sense of the 5 or so companies that you're funding right now that are out in the marketplace that we might know.
Well, one that just left our portfolio is Ribbit.
Yep.
And so Ribbit was a phenomenal, again, a phenomenally talented group of entrepreneurs with a big vision, and the vision was telecommunications as we know it is about to change.
Yep.
And there's a new paradigm coming in telecommunications. We need to have a platform which we can open up to creative engineers to develop applications to ride on that platform and really redefine what telecommunications means and the business model that goes with it. That company was just acquired by British Telecom for about $110 million 6 weeks ago. But again, a company that was funded in this challenging environment, according to some, with a very nice outcome in a relatively short period of time. Why? Because they identified a clear opportunity, they understood the value proposition, and they were rewarded.
Yeah.
So that would be an example. I think looking at e-commerce today is an area where you can look at market after market after market where there is 20, 30, $40 billion of activity taking place in a legacy environment, in an old-fashioned way, where you can bring technology to bear to create an electronic marketplace which allows the goods and services to move between buyers and sellers much more cost effectively and reallocate the profits in the process. Is that sexy? I don't know. I think making money is sexy. But there certainly is an opportunity to bring efficiency, to existing markets. And, that's an area where, regardless of what the NASDAQ is doing, those are existing markets and money is flowing and people are looking for ways for that money to flow more efficiently.
Yeah. Just on my panel yesterday, I saw 2 separate companies. One was VideoSurf and one was Photonauts. And I said Photonauts is sexy, but I think VideoSurf has a better business. How do you separate the two because I think I'll use Photonauts, but I don't think I see as good a business opportunity there for a variety of reasons. Video is a better advertising play than photography is.
Well, I think there are different types of models that gain traction in different types of markets. And what I mean by that is, today when the bar is pretty high for securing capital, the value proposition around a startup has got to be pretty cogent. There can't be a lot of speculation. We're going to build this, it's really going to be cool, we'll figure out the rest later. That's going to have a hard time getting funded in today's environment. Whereas if you can focus on a problem and you can quantify how big is the problem, how many people have that problem, what is the value of the solution, the calculus around attracting capital and building the business becomes much more straightforward.
Yeah.
So, if I go back to, if I put my old CEO hat on, back from my operating days, I would talk to my team about, who's the customer? What's his problem? How big is the problem? How many of them are there? What's the value of the solution? Can we build the solution? How much can we build it for? And that really was the calculus around, is this a viable market opportunity where we want to deploy capital? Today, for building companies, it's very much the same thing. And I think if you look at this environment today, where it is a little harder to secure capital, and only the truly serious entrepreneur wants to, is so convinced in the merits of their idea that they're going to put up with that. You know, they're able to do that homework, and they're prepared to do that homework. Entrepreneurs who, you know, being an entrepreneur sounds like a really good idea, and I've got an idea, but it's not really baked. That's a tougher, you know, that's a tougher hill to climb, because the capital's just not going to be available. And so for us, it's, you know, do you understand the problem? Do you understand the solution? Do you understand how the economics are going to work? You know, and the more that's understood, the more you can explain it to a venture capitalist, for example, you know, the easier it's going to be to attract people to the idea and at least get a hearing. And that's really what you want to do.
Yeah. I've talked to a lot of companies lately who are flaunting that they are not taking a VC. You know, Smug Mug, for instance, and I met an iPhone app company last night. I forget their name, but they're getting 50,000 downloads a day, and they built it all with friends and family money instead of going to VC markets. And a lot of times when I see a VC firm versus one of these other firms, the other firms seem like they're built more for a long term, more for let's build a steady growing business that goes long term, where the VCs seem to fund things that might have a shot to make it in 2 years. You know.
Well, I think there's one flavor, you know, does not fit all here. I mean, I think there's a lot of segmentation in the marketplace. And there's no doubt in certain areas of the technology community today, the barriers to developing a product, putting a product into the market are substantially lower. And because those barriers are lower, the capital required is lower. And so, you know, you do see situations where it's, you know, two creative entrepreneurs who have had some success in the past are doing it with friends and family money, and they're, you know, building an iPhone application, they're putting it in the Apple, you know, store, and they're getting the 50,000 downloads, and it didn't take a lot of capital to get there. You know, while successful, the scale of that business is not likely to be, you know, on the order of magnitude of some of the things we've seen in the past. You know, very capital efficient going in, easy to get going. You draft off a lot of infrastructure that exists, and you build a success. And if it didn't take a lot of capital to start that enterprise, it doesn't take a lot of capital on the exit for that to be meaningful. You know, at the same time, there are still, you know, the big, you know, infrastructure type plays that require not just capital and more capital than you might find from friends and family, but also requires a lot of expertise and a lot of experience. And, you know, I think that really is the domain of the venture capitalist, provided you've got relevant background that you can bring to the party. I think where you see some of this, we're not taking money from venture capitalists, is I think that the venture community has split. And there are venture capitalists who, and I would describe as old-fashioned venture capitalists, who really roll up their sleeves, you know, and help make a difference, working side by side with the entrepreneur, and they become part of the solution. And you know, when I talk to entrepreneurs, you know, sometimes you hear, well, you know, most venture capitalists are just another form of banker. They don't add a lot of value. So I think, you know, the challenge for venture capitalists is to be able to demonstrate that they really do bring value, and that value helps the entrepreneur improve their probability of success. And likewise for the entrepreneur, it's do your homework when you're talking to the venture community. If all capital is the same, you know, and it's largely a commodity, then what you want to look for is venture capitalists who have experience which is relevant to your business, the challenges that you're likely to encounter, who can help you navigate your way through that minefield, stepping on as few mines as possible. You know, and we all know when an entrepreneur starts with an idea, you know, it is not a straight line from start to finish. There are a lot of twists and turns, and many times you end up in places that you could not have anticipated. You know, what you want is you want a partner, hopefully there with you, who's seen that before, who can keep you out of the rough, keep you on the road, anticipate the challenges in advance, and be able to respond to them. You know, and that's what a good venture capitalist should bring to a startup entrepreneur and his team. And that's what a good entrepreneur should be looking for.
How important is, well, I know the team is important, because let's talk about RSS aggregators like FriendFeed and Social Thing. I chose FriendFeed because they had a better team. They had guys who started Gmail at Google. You know, it was a superstar team. They started Google Maps. One other guy started Google Talk, right? So 8 guys on the team, 3 of them are superstars. How important is that when you're looking at funding a company?
When we're looking at opportunities, we're always looking for big ideas. You know, it's how big of a business can we build here? You know, and again, in our case at Allegis Capital, we're not looking for 2 years and out. Our time frame when we look at ideas is we're prepared to build a business for 5, 6, 7 years. Okay. You know, a little old-fashioned, but if we believe in an idea and the idea has merit, each year you build value. At the end of the day, you'll be rewarded for that success. So we're not looking for quick hits. We're looking for building sustainable businesses. And in that process of building sustainable businesses, you got to have a good idea, but there is no substitute for a great team. It really is about people. If you go back to the discussion we had just a moment ago about running through that minefield, it's the DNA that allows the management team to respond to all the unanticipated changes that they inevitably will encounter. Yeah. Capital doesn't do that. The idea doesn't do that. The venture capitalists can help identify that opportunity, but it really is the team's ability to anticipate, respond, and adjust in real time that is essential to the long-term growth of a viable business. Yeah. And a good venture firm ought to be able to help the team anticipate that, maybe help them make changes in the team when appropriate to make sure they've got the right skill set. But for us at Allegis, entrepreneurs first, second, and third priority. The fourth point is it a big business idea? But it really is about people.
How do you know if it's a big business idea?
Well, part of it is intuition. Yeah. It's the entrepreneur has to help you with that because by definition, most venture firms are more generalists than they are specific into a given area. We all have pools of expertise based on past investing. So I do a lot of security because of things like Ironport. I do a lot of e-commerce. I do a lot of web media infrastructure. So I am more familiar with those markets. So entrepreneurs in those areas would seek me out because of the past experience. And so I have some innate knowledge. The entrepreneur is going to bring a vision that hopefully we can have a conversation around based on my knowledge and their perspective. But then it's a matter of going out and being able to validate the underlying assumptions that the entrepreneur has put forward. And in our case, we have networks. We have 35 major multinational corporations that we work with around the world just on the validation of ideas and markets idea. Doesn't mean those corporations necessarily will be able to articulate exactly what the entrepreneur is proposing. In many cases, they can't. Yeah. But they'll be able to talk to the problem, the nature of the problem, the magnitude of the problem, and how they view the problem. We're able to incorporate that knowledge, into the work with the entrepreneur to kind of wrap our arms around the opportunity. And if we get to a place where there's sort of a shared vision of this opportunity, in our particular case, at Allegis, we'll go right back to those same corporations, say, remember that problem we were talking about? We have an idea. In fact, Ironport, I think 2/3 of Ironport's first 12 customers happen to be our corporate relationships, where we were able to go back to those same corporations and say, remember we were talking about email and email is broken and how do you scale and manage email? We've got a portfolio company by the name of Ironport Systems, and we'd like to bring them in to talk with you about what they're doing and about your problem and see if there's a connection. Yeah.
How many times a day do you say no?
We, as a firm, Allegis Capital probably looks at about 2,000 investment opportunities a year. We will make 6 to 8 investments.
That's just mind-blowing. How do you look at so many companies and say no that many times?
Well, I mean, hey, give me the the problem is ex-entrepreneurs, right? Is we want to get sucked in. I mean, number one, we want to say yes because we're in the business of trying to find an idea that we can really get excited about. So we want to say yes. That has to be balanced with discipline of do we think we can. In our particular case, we look at can we actually advantage the company? Can we help them become more successful? And if we can't, then our money is like anybody else's money. It's a commodity.
Give me the top 5 ways that you can earn a no in your office.
Well, it's easy to get no's. It's the
well,
yes.
I know that. That's why I want to know. What are the top 5 ways you're gonna know?
Well, I think coming in unprepared.
I mean, if you're going to get a yes, you're probably getting a yes all over the place.
Well, I mean, right? I think number one, you need to understand. Sort of you need to understand the venture capitalists. The venture capitalist for the entrepreneur is your customer, right? And so you need to understand how venture capitalists make decisions. So, if you want to come in, you want to be prepared, have a big idea. Be able to defend how big that idea is and defend the opportunity around that idea in a way that is believable to the venture capitalists, but the venture capitalists can also, basically validate if they choose to go forward with you. Remember, that first meeting with the venture capitalists is really about getting to the second meeting.
Yeah.
So you want to be able to capture their attention, with that, that BHAG, as Scott Weiss at Ironport used to say, the big, hairy, audacious goal, right? Capture their attention with that, be able to kind of wrap around that the validation of the opportunity so that I, listening, say, okay, I get that, and I see that in a way that I can then validate. You want to make sure that you have a team that speaks to the challenges that you had ahead of you.
Yeah.
Again, back to people, people, people. It's great to have the big goal, but if you don't have people that can execute and can execute in real time, you're going to be challenged. So that's number 2 for us. Number 3, no hand waving, and what I mean by that is, there was a DirecTV a bunch of years ago when they launched. They had this advertisement, and they laid out a satellite topology, on a big whiteboard, and the actor in front of it was talking about 150 channels of high-definition television brought to your home directly. How does it work? I have no idea. Well, sometimes with entrepreneurs, what you'll hear is, I've got this great big idea. It's going to be fantastic, and yes, we can build it. How are we going to make money? Well, it could be one of 7 ways. That translates into a lot of challenge between idea and successful implementation. So having a well-thought-out idea that could be validated, one of the ones you hear a lot today, well, it's going to be ad-supported.
Yeah.
Right? And you say, well, okay, it's going to be ad-supported. I understand target demographic. It's going to be rich and meaningful to advertisers. Who on your team has built an ad network? Who on your team has sold advertising? Oh, we're going to hire that down the road. Well, your entire business proposition hinges on an advertising-supported model, and yet you don't have that DNA in your firm. Yeah. So think through the objections. One of the things that an entrepreneur has to do is understand all of the objections to his plan and be able to have an answer to those questions. And it's just absolutely essential. If you don't do that, you're going to have a hard time getting that second meeting. The next thing would be, do your research on the venture firms that you talk to. Make sure that whether it's stage of investing, Allegis Capital, 85% of what we do, first institutional round of investing.
Yeah.
Okay, we're an early stage investor. Well, if you're at that stage of development, make sure you're talking with early stage investors. Look for investors that have expertise in the domain in which you're operating. It's going to be much easier to establish a connection if, in fact, that relationship is there, if they have the history. Do reference checks on venture capitalists. This is back to, why do some entrepreneurs sort of swear off working with venture firms? Because, frankly, some venture capitalists deliver value and some don't. Yeah. If I'm an entrepreneur, I want somebody who's going to help me be more successful. So take the time, do the research. In the same way, that a sales manager or a CEO would spend a lot of time in advance understanding who is my target customer, what's my value proposition going to be, how do I get in the door, what do I offer them, what are the economics going to be. All the time and energy that goes into understanding that problem, when you're looking for capital, you've got to go through the exact same process and give it as much time and as much attention to make sure, A, you have a fit, that you improve your probability of being successful with that venture capitalist in the first meeting, and leading to a good partnership where you get a value-added investor who's going to help you manage the risk.
Yeah. What's a company you said no to that you wish you hadn't? Or is there such a thing?
I'm sure there is. Frankly, that's when the old, the convenient Alzheimer's kicks in, and we all try and forget it as quickly as possible. Man, what was I thinking? I missed that one. Look, we're not perfect, right? Yeah. And the challenge in looking at, we have a team of 5 investment professionals looking at 2,000 investment opportunities a year. That's each of us on average looking at 400. What we have to, the only way that we can manage that is getting to a no as fast as possible. Yeah. So the time that's left can work on those yeses. And that's a challenge. And inherently in that process, there will be situations where you didn't get it, the entrepreneur didn't explain it so you'd get it. Who knows who's right, who knows who's wrong. But subsequently a project goes on, it gets funded and achieves some level of success. And that really, I think, is where experience is the greatest teacher. You're able to look past, it's a great idea. It may not be polished, it may not be as complete as you would like it to be, but you can look past that to the core of the idea and say, that's a really interesting idea. in our case at Allegis Capital, we'll jump into those projects. Yeah. We'll say, here's what we like, here's what we think you haven't thought enough about, and let us work with you on that. And let's see if we can help you get there. We're comfortable doing that because we've all done that in our prior lives. Our team are all ex-operating executives. So we're comfortable looking at imperfect situations, going against a major opportunity, and saying our job is to get in and to help smooth that curve.
Do you have a good story of somebody you said no to? What's the most creative way they earned a no? You don't have to give names.
No, I mean that's a really, really interesting question. But if you go back to going back maybe 10 years ago, and we were doing a lot of things in content distribution networks, and we invested in a company called iBeam, which was a content distribution network, which went public. That was just as a sidebar, that was 4 slides that were handwritten, a 30-minute presentation, and we made a commitment. So venture capitalists can make very quick decisions if they understand the idea, they understand the value proposition, and the team is credible. That would be one extreme. But we did iBeam. We did another content distribution network by the name of it was called Sandpiper, and then it merged with Digital Island. That went public as well. And there was a third major content distribution network that was getting started at the time, coming out of MIT, and they were on the East Coast, and we're a very local investor. This tends to be a local business for seed and early stage investing. You need to be able to spend time with your companies, and they were on the East Coast, so that was kind of outside of our. They were geographically undesirable. I guess that's what the girls say about boyfriends that live across the country, but their differentiator was we have the algorithm. Well, what do you mean we have? Oh, I can't tell you. It's secret. But we have the algorithm. And their differentiator was the algorithm. And, I'm like, well, help me out here. Fill in the blanks. Tell me about it's the algorithm. As a result, we didn't give it a lot of attention. The company's called Ackerman, and went on to be rather successful because they had the algorithm. And so I was looking for, more specificity. There was a geographic component to it, so it would have been hard for us to get there. But yeah, they had an algorithm, and turned out it was a good algorithm, and they built a great company. So it's an example of it is it's an art, it's not a science, and it certainly is one where I think where the more experience you have, the better you get at it. You have to see a lot of things. Frankly, you have to make a fair number of mistakes to really kind of hone your senses and hone your intuition. When we invest, most of the time, it's what I lovingly refer to as 2 guys and a dog in a garage with a big idea of how to change the world. There's not a product to try. There's not a customer to call. It's a vision. And that really comes down to how do you feel about the vision? Can you understand the market they're going after? Does the articulation of the value proposition kind of hold water? How do you feel about the people? And so much of it is based on experience as ex-operating guys, intuition, and chemistry. And that's all you have to go on. Now, as companies move down the road, and as they move through subsequent rounds of financing, as they gain momentum, there's a lot more to wrap your arms around. Yeah. It's like, well, gee, there's 300 customers, there's a complete management team, they've been shipping products, they've got revenue. Now it's more of a banker-like conversation. That's not what we do. And frankly, that's not what old-fashioned venture capital was about. Old-fashioned venture capital was about ideas and entrepreneurs and creating value. When we started the conversation, you were talking about today's NASDAQ and what you may hear from other venture capitalists. When we make an investment, today's NASDAQ is irrelevant to me. Yeah. I'm looking at an idea that we can create value around over the next 5, 6, 7 years. What the NASDAQ did today, or what it did last month, or what it did last quarter is irrelevant to me. I'm looking to build for the long haul. And our belief at Allegis is if you're focused on solving real problems for the long haul, there will always be value if you're successful at the end of the day. Now, when the end of the day comes and a company is ready to graduate, either through an acquisition or into a public company, sure, the health of those markets at that point in time will have a determination on the price that the company is sold to the public or acquired by a corporation for. No doubt about that. Nothing I can do about that. I can't change it. I can't affect it. I can recognize it and back that into how do we make sure this investment is as successful financially as possible. And there you get into things, watch your cost basis, watch your capital efficiency. If the exit value is $200 million, if it took $100 million of capital to get there, it has a level of profitability. Yeah. If you got to the same destination with $10 million in capital, it's a much more profitable investment. And that's in our interest as an investor. It's also in the interest of the entrepreneurial team. Yeah. We both do much better at the end of the day.
One last question. Rocky and I were both at a company that went south. And when Jennifer too, yeah. When a company starts,
never happened to me.
When a company starts going south, is it savable? Do you ever see it be savable, or?
Yes, it can be. The problem is, I mean, the opportunity, the challenge is you've got to see the problem early enough. And all too often, what happens is that management teams and boards go into denial. It's like, we just need a little more time. We just need a little more runway. It's going to turn in our direction. Where if you were to step outside of it, if you were less emotionally involved, you would say, ain't no way in hell. We got a real problem here, and we need to figure out, either make a hard left turn or make a hard right turn, as quickly as possible. And this, frankly, is where if you've got a good board that's been around the block, you've got good investors who can bring that expertise, who can, basically hold up the mirror and say, guys, take a look. It ain't pretty. Let's deal with the reality of exactly where we are. And it doesn't mean we quit. Let's just figure out where we go from here. But all too often, that conversation takes place, when there's no ability to deny the reality any longer. And at that point in time, you're usually out of money. Then all of a sudden, the mind's open to all possibilities, but it's too late. And so the key in those situations is to be able to be honest with yourself, to acknowledge the problems early on, and be able to make those midterm corrections that say it's not over here, it's a little more over to the left, and keep making those adjustments, as opposed to, well, damn it, this is what we put in the plan, and that's what we're going to do. When all the market feedback is, no, you're wrong, it's over to the left. And frankly, that's where, if you've got good experienced venture capitalists who've been around the block themselves, who have run businesses, they've got the scar tissue, to share with you in terms of, I've been to this movie before, I know how it ends. Let's not do this again. Let's shift over here. But again, all too often that conversation comes too late in the life of a young company.
Thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Robert, I enjoyed it.
Looking forward to seeing what you fund next.
Well, I'll keep you posted. So.